Yo, what is good everybody? Hope y'all are doing well today. In this video, I'm going to show y'all how to make a beat similar to Metro Boomin for his recent project, Heroes and Villains. Per usual, I'm going to show y'all how to make this beat from scratch. I'm not going to say too much else, so with all that being said, let's just jump right into the sample. So starting off with the tempo, I chose 142 beats per minute. So for my first sound, I went into Omnisphere, specifically Keyscape, and got this rich ballad piano preset. So I started with this MIDI here, and I pretty much just laid down some bass notes. I just kept it real simple. So I wanted to start with my root note. So for the sample, I made it in F sharp minor. So I started just by putting down this F3 once every 2 measures, and then I copied it down. Once I had F sharp 2 selected, I held Alt on my keyboard and scrolled down to lower the velocity here at the bottom. So I kept those pretty straightforward, nothing too complicated just yet. So for my second sound, this is where I started to kind of get the more analog synth type of sound. I went to the RP speakers pack in Analog Lab, and I got this PM push-in key preset, and I just put in this kind of repetitive melody. I just made the first 2 measures here and just copied it over for the remaining 6. So the notes that I was using for this were the first, second, third, and fifth notes in the scale for the most part. I just used that and just different octaves of some of the higher notes just to add a little variation. And then once I had the whole thing, the velocities at the bottom are kind of randomized. I did this by hitting Alt R on my keyboard, and in this menu I turned off the pattern, and on the levels I adjusted this velocity knob. So routing that to a mixer track, I put on an EQ, a low cut, and a couple of these dips here in the mids to cut out some of the harsh frequencies. And then I put on RC20 on the Vinyl 1 preset. I just kept the distortion and turned the space up. I wanted to add a little bit of a crunch type of distortion and add some reverb to it. So after putting in the analog key, I got this one shot from a Marco Lens multi-kit. I turned up the out knob, and then in the envelope, I turned the hold all the way up and adjusted the decay and the release. So the one shot by itself sounds like this. Pretty similar to the last one, I just made the first 2 measures and just copied it over for whatever was left. I'm mainly just using the F sharp minor triad and just variations or different notes in it. So I started with the first and fifth note in the scale, so F sharp and C sharp. If you don't want to think too much about theory, you just copy this note up by 7 half steps. Then I put in the second note here, G sharp, or 2 half steps above F sharp. And then I put in the fourth note in the scale, B, which is 2 half steps below the fifth here. And then I put in A over here to kind of contrast the G to F sharp in the first measure. This is 3 half steps above the root note. And just using a combination of those similar to the last one, I just made the entire melody here and tried to keep it fairly simple. For effects on it, I just put out a low cut to cut out some of the lows, and then a dip here in the mids to clean it up a little bit. And then for my last melody sound, I went into the Experiment Club preset bank in Analog Lab, and I got this string ensemble Herbo preset. And with this, pretty similar to the last 2, I'm just using the F sharp minor triad and different notes or variations of it, except this time I'm incorporating the 6th note in the scale too, or it's just a half step up from the 5th. For effects on that, similar to a lot of the other sounds that I have, I just have an EQ with a low cut and a couple of dips to cut out the harshness. So once I had all of my melodies here, I went to the mixer track and I armed all of them by clicking this here. In normal FL, these turn red, but I have FL21, so it just looks kind of different. So once I had all those highlighted here on the bottom, I hit Alt R, and then I changed the mode to pattern, cut remainder, and then hit start. Once I had those audio clips, I imported those into the playlist, and I made a couple minor changes. The first being the second melody that was kind of repetitive, the analog key. I changed this by routing it to a new mixer track. I just put some default halftime on it. So in the final loop, this is what it sounds like. And then with this sound, I kept this the same. Except what I ended up doing is I held shift, clicked on it, and dragged the clip over and down. Once I had it in the new track, I went to the menu here on the top and then hit make unique. And then in the audio clip settings, I set the mode to stretch, changed this range to 12, and put the pitch all the way to the right. I'm pretty much just putting it up 1 octave. Once I had those adjustments made, I went into Max Shooter's sound source kit and I got these 2 accents. The first one being this one. And with this, I just time stretched it so that it was 4 measures long. And then I also changed the pitch by putting it down 300 cents because this was originally an A and I wanted an F sharp. So if you just count down in the piano, it goes G sharp, G, and then F sharp. And then I put in this accent. And then an octave down version of it. And again, these were originally in C, so I had to pitch the octave up version 600 cents. And then the octave down version, it's also 600 cents, but I pitched down an octave using this pitch wheel up here. And on the master track for the loop, I put on this parametric EQ and put this little dip here at around 300 hertz just to cut out some of the muddiness so it sounds a little cleaner. So once I had all these done, I arranged the stems and rendered out the final loop. So once I had the finished loop rendered, I opened it into a new project file. I arranged the loop accordingly, and then I added some drums to it, mixed it, and rounded out the rest of the beat. I pretty much kept everything the same with the sample. The only difference that I had is I went to the pitch knob here and I put it up by 8 cents. Just a little marginal difference. I felt like it just kind of added a bit of a darker vibe to it, but honestly it's not that noticeable in the final render. For my first drum sound, I went and got this 808 Mafia type of snare, and this pretty much just took the place of the clap. It's just on the 3rd beat of every measure. Next, I put in my hi-hat. It's kind of like a normal hit sounding hi-hat. For this pattern, I kept it relatively simple. I just have the basic 2-step, and then I just added a little triplet here and there. I kind of wanted the snares and the kicks to kind of do most of the rhythm work here. Next, I put in my snare pattern, and like I said in the last one, this does more in terms of the complexity of the drum pattern. As you can see, it's pretty much just hitting in normal spots where they would for the snare. The only significant difference that I made for this is instead of having these snares hit here on the off beat, I just moved it back so that it hits on the 4th beat instead, and then also have these kind of lower velocity accent snares here. For these 2 rolls here, I believe I was using the 1/3 step snap to grid, and I pretty much just let these do all the work when it came to leading into the different parts of the patterns. Also, this is what the waveform for the snare looks like. After the snare, I put in this rack kick. And with this, I tried to keep it pretty simple because I knew I was going to do a little more with the 808. But this is what the kick sounds like with the rest of the drum sound so far. And then after the kick, for my last 2 drum patterns, I put in my 808, and it's using this sizzle 808 sound. So this is what the first pattern looks like. Overall, I tried to keep it pretty simple, and similar to the loop, the root note of F sharp is the most prevalent here. And then I also used the 6th note in the scale. And then I also added a second 808 pattern, and this one just kind of leads in a different way at the end, but pretty much the rest of the notes are the same. So that's gonna wrap it up for this one. Hope y'all enjoyed it and found it pretty helpful. Thank you for making it all the way to the end. And let me know any feedback, thoughts, or recommendations you have for me in the comments. And that's gonna do it for me, so I'll see you on the next one. Peace.